Snowflakes drifted across the windshield like falling ashes the night my father told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas. I had just pulled into the driveway, heart stupidly hopeful despite everything, when my phone lit up with a message that felt like a slap. "Alyssa, don't come tonight. You're too dramatic for a peaceful holiday." For a moment, I just sat there staring at the screen while my breath fogged the glass. The house glowed warm behind the curtains, shadows moving, laughter spilling out, silhouettes crossing back and forth as if nothing was missing. As if I wasn't missing. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, waiting for anyone to follow up with. He didn't mean it or ignore him, just come inside. But nothing came. Not from my mother. Not from my siblings. Not even from Emma, who used to run to the door every time I visited. The silence hit harder than the message. When I finally stepped out into the cold, my boots crunched against the snow like the sound of something cracking inside me. Through the window, I saw the whole Barker family gathered around the table, passing dishes, clinking glasses, smiling. Dad at the head, Mom adjusting a napkin, Caleb joking about something, Emma laughing politely. Not a single empty seat, not a single missing face, except mine. I stood there like a stranger spying on a life I once belonged to. My phone buzzed again, this time with a second message from Dad. "Don't make a scene." A part of me wanted to knock on the door anyway, to demand an explanation, to remind them that I lived only 10 minutes away. But another part, the part that remembered years of being told to stop crying, stop overreacting, stop being too much, knew exactly how that would end. I swallowed hard, turned away from the warm glow of my family's home, and walked back to my car. If they didn't want me at Christmas, fine. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I started the engine and let the heater blast against my frozen fingers. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked hollow, like someone who had run out of places to fit her hurt. I tried calling Emma, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried, Caleb ignored. Mom's phone rang twice before she declined the call. A familiar ache settled in my chest, the kind that came from years of being the family's emotional punching bag. The dramatic one, the sensitive one, the problem. I whispered into the empty car, "I didn't even do anything." But saying it out loud didn't make it hurt any less. After 10 minutes of sitting there, headlights still shining on the garage door, I wasn't allowed to walk through. I put the car in reverse. The tires skidded slightly on the ice as I backed out, but I didn't look back again. I drove toward the city instead, where the streetlights reflected in long streaks across the wet pavement. I wasn't ready to go home. I wasn't ready to sit alone in my apartment pretending the night didn't hurt. That's when a notification popped up on my lock screen. Bright Future Innovation Gala. Reminder starts at 7:00 p.m. I had dismissed their invitation earlier, assuming I wouldn't fit in, assuming I'd feel out of place among tech executives and innovators. My father always said awards were overrated, that recognition didn't mean anything, that humility mattered more than ambition. I spent so many years believing him that turning down the gala felt natural, being overlooked felt familiar. But tonight, something twisted inside me, something sharp, something awake. My father didn't want me at Christmas. My family didn't even try to reach out. They had chosen a peaceful dinner over me. I let my thumb hover over the notification for a moment. Maybe I didn't need their warm dining room or their curated calm. Maybe I didn't need to beg for space at a table that never had a seat for me in the first place. I turned onto the highway, the city lights growing brighter the farther I drove. Snow drifted across the asphalt like ghosts chasing my tires. I glanced at the digital clock, 6:42 p.m. The gala was only 15 minutes away. I didn't know anyone there. I wasn't dressed for it. I wasn't prepared. But for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. What scared me more was the thought of going home, closing my door, and letting my father's words decide the rest of my night, or worse, the rest of my life. So I kept driving. The skyline rose ahead of me, shimmering with holiday lights and rooftop trees. Somewhere inside one of those tall glass buildings was a room full of people who didn't know me, didn't judge me, didn't expect me to shrink to fit their comfort. Somewhere in that room was a version of myself I had never given a chance. My phone buzzed again. Dad. I let it ring. With each mile, the house I left behind felt smaller, dimmer, like a memory fading in the rearview mirror. And the city ahead? Bright, alive, unpredictable. It felt like possibility. By the time I turned into the gala's underground parking garage, my pulse wasn't trembling anymore. It was steady. Sure. Almost bold. I pulled into a space, turned off the engine, and stared at my reflection one more time. My eyes were still red from holding back tears. My makeup was far from perfect. My hair was a little messy. But I looked like someone who was done begging to be wanted. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped into the cold. Tonight, I wasn't the dramatic daughter anymore. Tonight, I was something else entirely. The wind sliced across the pavement as I stepped out of the parking garage and followed the signs toward the Bright Future Innovation Gala. My breath formed white clouds in the cold air, my boots clicking against the concrete walkway as if marking the beginning of something I didn't fully understand yet. The building rose above me, sleek glass glowing against the night sky, every window reflecting the city's holiday lights. I paused at the entrance, watching elegantly dressed guests move through the revolving doors with practiced confidence. For a brief second, I wondered what I was doing here, alone, underdressed, carrying the weight of a ruined Christmas and a lifetime of being told that wanting more made me difficult. I slipped inside anyway. Warm air washed over me as I stepped into the lobby, along with a low hum of conversation and soft orchestral music drifting from upstairs. A chandelier shaped like a swirling helix hung above the staircase, shimmering with thousands of tiny lights. People moved around me in tailored coats, long gowns, polished shoes. Their laughter echoed across the marble floor, effortless and bright in a way I never felt at home. I tugged my coat closer around me, suddenly reminded of the red sweater still folded in the back seat of my car, the one I had planned to wear to my family's dinner. The thought left a dull ache in my chest. Alyssa. I turned toward the familiar voice just as Nora nearly collided with me. She was stunning in a deep navy dress, her hair swept back in a sleek bun, the kind of put-together confidence I silently envied. She grabbed my shoulders with both hands, eyes widening with a mix of shock and excitement. "You actually came," she breathed, half laughing, half scolding. "I didn't think you would." "I wasn't going to," I admitted. But plans changed. Nora's expression softened immediately. She didn't ask, she didn't pry, she just gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "I'm glad you're here. Come on, let's get you inside." She looped her arm through mine and led me up the sweeping staircase. As we reached the main hall, my breath caught. The entire ballroom looked like something out of a futuristic winter dream. White and silver accents, holographic displays floating above small tables, and soft blue lighting that made everything glow. A digital wall displayed the names of nominees and contributors, their faces rotating slowly like constellation points in a night sky. Then I saw it. My name. Not large, not flashy, but there, Alyssa Hart, UX Innovation Contributor. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stared at it, afraid it would disappear if I blinked. "They featured your adaptive model," Nora said, nudging me. "Everyone's been talking about it." "But they don't even know me," I said, voice small. She arched an eyebrow. "Alyssa, your work speaks for itself. You've been hiding in meetings for so long you forgot the impact you've actually had." I swallowed hard. Maybe she was right. Maybe the world outside my family wasn't as determined to make me invisible. We pushed deeper into the crowd, weaving between tech executives, engineers, and young entrepreneurs. I felt myself shrinking again, the old instinct kicking in. Stay quiet. Don't draw attention. Don't embarrass yourself. My father's voice crawled through my memory. Don't brag. Don't act like you're special. But then Nora tugged me toward a small circle near the main stage, her eyes bright with nervous excitement. "Lila Morgan is here," she whispered. "She asked about you." My heart lurched. Lila Morgan, the CEO of Bright Future, the woman whose interviews I had watched for years, the one who championed inclusive design in tech. And now she was walking toward us tall and poised in a crisp white pantsuit that seemed to glow under the lights. "Alyssa Hart," she said warmly, extending a hand. "I've heard a lot about your work." My hand nearly trembled as I shook hers. "You have..." She smiled, the kind that made you feel seen. "Your UX adaptability model has been circulating in several design forums. It's impressive. I hope tonight gives you a chance to connect with people who appreciate innovators like you. No one in my family had ever spoken to me like that. No one had ever said my ideas were impressive." As Lila stepped aside to greet another executive, Nora leaned in. "See, this is where you belong." Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the air behind me. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." I froze. My chest tightened in recognition long before I turned around. Connor Hale. He stood there with a drink in hand, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and a careless grin, one that had infuriated me countless times at work. The man who claimed credit for my design drafts. The man who interrupted me in meetings. The man who once told me, "You need to calm down, Alyssa. You're too passionate." He looked me up and down with a smug smirk. "Didn't expect to see you at something like this." Something like this. A place where I supposedly didn't belong. A place where he assumed he'd shine brighter. "I was invited," I said, quietly steadying my breath. Connor chuckled. "Well, try not to get too overwhelmed. These events aren't really made for..." "For who?" Nora snapped, stepping between us. "People who actually do the work." Connor's smile faltered for half a second before he rolled his eyes. "Relax. Just saying hi." Nora glared until he walked away, then turned back to me, jaw clenched. "Don't let him get in your head. He's threatened. That's all." But his words lingered, wrapping around the old fear that never fully left me. I stepped away from the noise, drifting to the balcony that overlooked the glittering San Francisco skyline. The cold air hit me like a necessary shock. City lights blurred below, crisp and alive. For a moment I closed my eyes, letting the night settle into my bones. Behind me was the world that dismissed me, underestimated me, replaced me at Christmas dinner without hesitation. In front of me was a world that might finally see me. When I heard my name announced from the stage microphone, my eyes flew open. "Alyssa Hart, one of this year's nominees for Innovator to Watch. Please make your way forward." My heart stopped. Nora's voice behind me was barely a whisper. "This is your moment." My legs felt like they didn't belong to me as I stepped away from the balcony and back into the glowing ballroom. Conversation softened into a low buzz as the announcer repeated my name, each syllable echoing through the speakers and into the center of my chest. I could feel my pulse thudding beneath my coat collar, a steady drumbeat, reminding me that every step forward was a step I'd never taken before. I wiped my palms discreetly along the sides of my dress, lifting my chin even though my stomach twisted like a knot pulled too tight. Nora appeared beside me, eyes wide with excitement and something like pride. "You're okay," she whispered. "Just walk to the side of the stage. I'll be right here." She squeezed my arm, grounding me for just a second before gently nudging me forward. The lights grew brighter the closer I moved. A technician in a black headset approached and clipped a small mic onto my dress, murmuring something I couldn't quite hear through the haze building in my mind. It was like walking underwater, every sound muffled, every face blurry, every breath a slow drag of cold air into trembling lungs. I could feel the panic rising. Not loud, not dramatic. Just an old familiar tightening that wrapped around my ribs like invisible rope. "You don't belong here. You shouldn't have come. This isn't your world." The voice wasn't mine, it was my father's, the one I had grown up absorbing until it felt like part of my own internal dialogue. I steadied myself against a column, shutting my eyes for a brief second. When I opened them again, the crowd had shifted, and that's when I saw her. A little girl in the front row, no older than 7, wearing a sparkly silver dress that caught the light every time she moved. She was clutching a small children's coding kit, hugging it tight to her chest like something precious. Her eyes were fixed on the stage, wide and hopeful, the way I once looked at anything remotely connected to science or tech before I learned to hide my enthusiasm. For a moment, the panic froze. Then it softened, like a knot loosening. I saw myself in her, my 8-year-old self experimenting in the kitchen, begging my father to look at the tiny robot I'd built, only to be met with sighs and lectures about making messes and getting carried away. That child had wanted anyone, to tell her she wasn't too much, that she made sense, that her excitement wasn't something to be ashamed of. If I walked away now, what lesson would that girl learn? A quiet strength stirred inside me just enough to take the next step. Someone ushered me toward the edge of the stage as the host finished introducing me, Alyssa Hart, an emerging UX innovator whose adaptability model has been gaining significant attention in the tech community. The applause that followed felt unreal, like it came from some distant world where I wasn't the daughter who ruined Christmas, but someone capable of building something that mattered. I stepped out into the light. My hands trembled slightly as I approached the podium. The crowd looked like a sea of blurred shapes shimmering under soft blue lights. My voice, when it finally came, was small at first. "Hi. I wasn't sure I should even come tonight." A hush fell over the room, not judgmental but attentive. "I almost spent Christmas alone," I said quietly, surprising even myself, because someone told me I was too dramatic for a peaceful holiday. There were murmurs, soft shifts in posture. I took a slow breath. "I've been told I'm too intense, too emotional, too passionate. Too much." I looked at the girl in the front row again. She was still watching me, still clutching her little coding kit. I used to shrink myself to fit the rooms I walked into. I continued. At home, at school, even at work. I was always trying not to take up too much space. The words flowed more easily now, lifted by something deep inside me I hadn't felt in a long time. But tonight, I decided I wouldn't apologize for being passionate, or emotional, or dramatic. Those are not faults. They are power. A few people clapped, then more, then the entire room. My heartbeat steadied. I glanced toward the side of the hall where Connor Hale stood with his drink, his jaw tensed. He wasn't smiling anymore. "And if you've ever been told you're too much," I said, voice stronger, "maybe you were just too bright for the people sitting closest to you." This time the applause rose like a wave, warm and overwhelming. People stood. Phones lifted, lights flashed. The little girl in the front row beamed at me, her coding kit clutched like a promise. When I stepped away from the podium, my hands were still trembling, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From something like freedom. Nora met me by the curtain and threw her arms around me. "You did it," she whispered fiercely. "You really did it." I didn't trust my voice enough to reply, but I nodded. I felt different, lighter and heavier at the same time, like I had finally put down a burden I had been carrying my whole life. A staff member rushed over, breathless. "Your clip is trending," she said. "It's blowing up." I blinked. "Already?" She nodded eagerly. "People can't stop sharing that line about not dimming your light." I stepped back, heart pounding, as if the room had tilted. Something big had just begun. San Francisco shimmered beneath the night sky as I stepped out of the gala hall's side entrance, my breath forming soft clouds in the cold air. I needed a moment to steady myself, to let the last 10 minutes settle into something real. The applause, the lights, the way the room seemed to rise with every word I spoke, it all felt like a dream I wasn't sure I had permission to touch. I wrapped my coat tighter as a breeze swept down the street, carrying the scent of the bay and the distant hum of holiday traffic. For the first time in hours, no one was watching me. It was oddly comforting. But the illusion of quiet didn't last long. "Alyssa." "There you are." Nora jogged toward me, heels clicking on the pavement. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement, her eyes bright. "You vanished. Do you have any idea what's happening in there?" I shook my head, still dazed. I just needed air. Well, come back inside, she laughed breathlessly. Because you have no idea how many people want to meet you right now. She hooked her arm through mine and pulled me back toward the glowing doors of the venue. The moment we stepped in, the sound hit me like a wave. Music, laughter, drinks clinking, and the soft hum of tech executives mid-conversation. Screens floated above the room displaying interactive designs and project showcases. A massive digital display rotated through the Innovator to Watch nominees, my face appearing every few minutes among them. It was surreal. This is insane, I whispered. This is just the beginning, Nora said. We wove through clusters of guests until she guided me toward the center of the room. Lila Morgan is here, she murmured. She's been looking for you. Before I could process that, a tall woman in a white pantsuit turned toward us, her posture elegant, her smile warm. Alyssa Hart, she said, extending a hand. I'm very glad to finally meet you. Her handshake was confident but kind. Your adaptive UX model made it onto 3 different panels. This quarter, she continued. Your approach to inclusive interface design is refreshing. I hope you're planning to stay in this industry for a long time. My mouth went dry. I hope so. I managed. Lila's smile deepened. Good. We need voices like yours. The words settled in my chest like light. As she moved on, Nora nudged me. See? This is what happens when the right people hear you. I felt the edges of a smile tug at my lips, small, uncertain, but real. Then everything shifted. A low, familiar laugh came from behind me. My stomach tightened before I even turned. Connor Hale stood near the refreshment table swirling a drink in his hand, while charming a group of executives. His confidence radiated across the room, smooth and practiced. His voice carried just enough for me to hear as we approached. Well, I pushed the team hard on that project, he was saying, but leadership requires pressure. You know how it is. Nora's jaw clenched. Unbelievable. I stayed silent. My pulse quickened. Connor lifted his glass. Honestly, it was my vision that made the UX model as adaptable as it is. When people talk about innovation, they forget that leadership drives everything. He smiled, the kind that always felt like a slap. My design, my groundwork, my sleepless nights, my diagrams, my testing. A small laugh slipped from Nora sharp as broken glass. He really can't help himself. When Connor finally noticed us, his expression flickered, but only for a second. Well, he said smoothly, if it isn't tonight's surprise guest. I met his gaze. Connor. He took a slow sip. Quite the speech up there. Hope you weren't planning to reinterpret our team dynamics too creatively. Nora stepped forward, but I gently stopped her with my hand. I wasn't talking about you, I said evenly. I was talking about a pattern. He smirked, but something in his eyes hardened. Right, just making sure. He excused himself with a grin, but I could feel the tension he left behind lingering like stale cologne. I drew in a slow breath, pushing the frustration out of my lungs. I shouldn't let him get to me. You shouldn't, Nora said, but that doesn't mean he deserves to walk around like he owns the place. Before I could respond, a soft chime came over the speakers. The lights dimmed slightly as a host began introducing the next highlight of the evening. People drifted toward the stage, conversations fading. Come on, Nora whispered. Let's head closer. We moved through the crowd until we reached the back of the main hall. The host's voice echoed warmly across the room, listing achievements, contributions, moments of innovation. Then, my name appeared on the rotating display overhead. Alyssa Hart, the host announced, whose UX adaptability contributions are quickly gaining traction across the industry. We're proud to include her among this year's Innovators to Watch. Applause filled the space. Nora squeezed my hand. But something in my chest tightened. Not fear this time, but something softer. Something unfamiliar. Pride. As the display shifted to another nominee, the host continued speaking in the background, but I barely heard him. The noise, the lights, the crowd, all of it blurred slightly around the edges. Warmth bloomed in my chest, spreading like a slow sunrise. I wasn't the unwanted daughter standing outside a glowing window tonight. I wasn't the girl who ruined Christmas. I wasn't the one who had to shrink so others could feel comfortable. I was a name on a screen, a contributor, a speaker, a voice worth hearing. I stepped closer to the stage lights, the sound of applause echoing in my ears. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't walking into someone else's world. I was stepping into my own. The steps leading up to the stage felt impossibly long, like one of those dreams where your legs move, but the ground stretches endlessly beneath you. Each footfall sent a dull echo through my chest, and for a second I wondered if everyone in the ballroom could hear my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. The soft glow of the overhead lights blurred at the edges as I reached the wings where an event coordinator clipped a small mic onto my collar with expert efficiency. My fingers trembled. My throat tightened. The applause sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't the kind of person who stood on stages and spoke as if she belonged. The panic rose in my chest slowly, like warm water filling a glass too quickly. My breath shortened. My vision tunneled. I shut my eyes and tried to steady myself, but the moment I did, a voice I knew too well rang through my mind. "You're being dramatic, Alyssa. Again. You ruin everything when you get emotional. Stop making a scene." My father's words echoed through me like ghosts. I tasted iron in my mouth as the air thickened. I tried to inhale, but the breath caught halfway up my throat. A technician asked if I was okay. I nodded even though I wasn't. When I opened my eyes, the stage lights skimming across the audience made the room look like a starfield, endless, overwhelming, blinding. And then I saw her. A little girl sat in the front row, legs swinging, hair tied with silver ribbon. She couldn't have been more than 7. In her lap was a small coding kit, the same model I had begged for when I was her age. She held it like treasure. Her eyes fixed on the stage with a wonder I recognized so intimately it felt like a punch to the chest. She reminded me of the version of myself I had buried under years of being told to shrink. 8-year-old me, determined and bright-eyed, explaining my first robotics project to my father while he barely looked up from the newspaper. 10-year-old me, excited about the science fair, but told not to brag. 13-year-old me, winning a scholarship and overhearing him say, "She gets carried away." If I walked off this stage now, what would that little girl learn? That excitement is embarrassing, that ambition is disruptive, that being passionate is something to apologize for. No, not tonight. A cool breath slid into my lungs. My pulse steadied barely but enough. I stepped forward when the host called my name again, and the applause guided me into the light. The podium felt enormous. The microphone seemed too close. My voice trembled as the first words left my mouth. I wasn't sure I should come tonight. The room quieted instantly. I swallowed, my hands tightening around the edges of the podium. Actually, I almost didn't. Because earlier today someone told me I was too dramatic for a peaceful Christmas. A ripple of murmurs swept across the crowd. I've been told versions of that my whole life. I continued, surprised at how steady my voice sounded now. That I overreact. That I feel too much. That I'm too intense. Too passionate. Too emotional. I let the silence settle for a moment. The girl in the front row leaned forward, eyes wide. For a long time, I believed them. So I learned to shrink myself. I tried to take up as little space as possible. At home, at school, even at work. Especially at work. I didn't look toward Connor, but I felt him stiffen somewhere to my left. Good. But here's what I realized recently. I lifted my chin, feeling the warmth of the room shift around me. The things people called my flaws, my intensity, my excitement, my emotions were never weaknesses. They were strengths disguised as problems. My passion pushed me to innovate. My emotion helped me understand user behavior. My sensitivity made me better, not worse. A few claps broke the silence. Then more. And if you've ever been told you're too much. I paused as the room leaned in. Maybe you were just too bright for the people sitting closest to you. The applause struck like lightning, fast, loud, rising until the entire room was on its feet. I blinked, stunned. The girl in the front row was cheering her little coding kit bouncing on her knees. I stepped back from the podium, breath shaking in my chest, but this time the tremble felt like release, not fear. Nora appeared near the curtain the moment I stepped off stage, tears shining in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "You actually did it." Before I could speak, a member of the gala's media team hurried over with a tablet. "Alyssa, you're trending. That line is everywhere." She turned the screen toward me. Comments were flooding in. Likes, shares, reactions. "People can't stop replaying your speech," she said breathlessly. "It's going viral." I stared at the screen as a single surreal truth settled into my bones. Something had shifted tonight. In the room, online, and inside me. Something big had just begun. The applause from the ballroom was still echoing faintly in my ears hours after the gala ended, but by the time I finally stepped into my apartment, the adrenaline had burned off, leaving a dense heaviness behind. The place was still exactly as I left it, gift bags stacked neatly by the couch, the unworn sweater draped over the armrest, the cinnamon candle flickering low. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt hollow in a way that tightened my throat. I closed the door behind me and let my back sink against it. Everything inside me felt full and empty at the same time. I had stood on a stage and said things I never thought I'd say aloud. People clapped, people cared, people saw me. My family didn't. That thought alone made my chest squeeze. I took a deep breath, hung up my coat, and walked toward the kitchen. The pie cooling on the counter was untouched now, cold and uninviting. The gifts sat exactly where I had arranged them earlier that afternoon. Ribbons, perfectly curled tags carefully written. The sight of them made something ache deep in my ribs. Before I could reach for a glass of water, my phone buzzed loudly on the counter. I jumped. For a split second, hope fluttered uselessly in my chest, then vanished the moment I saw the caller ID. Dad. The vibration rattled the phone against the wood, sharp and insistent. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then it buzzed again, and again, and again. 27 missed calls. My breath caught mid-inhalation. I grabbed the phone with trembling fingers and opened the voicemail tab. The list scrolled longer than my screen could show. Dad's voice filled the speaker the moment I pressed play. "Alyssa, you need to call me back, immediately." His tone was tight-clipped with barely contained frustration. I swallowed hard and clicked the next message. "What did you do?" he snapped. "People are calling me asking why I wasn't at that event with you. Why didn't you tell me you were doing something like that?" What am I supposed to say? I closed my eyes, forehead pressing against the cold cabinet door. Next message. "Alyssa, call me. This isn't funny. People from church said they saw you on their TV tonight." My stomach twisted. He didn't sound proud. He sounded cornered. Next message. "You made me look like an idiot. A father should know these things. Why didn't you tell us everyone is talking?" The kitchen lights flickered overhead as if the building itself winced. Next message. "Call me back. We need to talk." And then silence. I set the phone down slowly, palms sweaty against the counter. The cold air from the vent hummed softly, but everything else felt suffocating. All my life I had wanted him to call me with urgency, just not like this. Before I could process any of it, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text. "Ava, my younger sister. Dad is freaking out. Everyone at church is talking about you. But I watched your speech. You looked amazing." A tiny warmth flickered somewhere inside me, but it dimmed quickly under the weight of what followed. Dad's losing it. Just call him so he calms down. There it was. The invisible script. The family expectation I had memorized since childhood. Fix it. Soften it. Protect Dad's ego. Handle his anger. Absorb the impact so he didn't have to. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Nothing felt right. I set the phone face down on the couch cushion and pressed my palms to my eyes. I needed something normal, something grounding, so I walked to the sink and filled a glass with water. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft drip of the faucet, mundane sounds pulled me back into myself. I had barely taken a sip when the phone started buzzing again, vibrating so hard it nearly slid off the couch. Dad. The 28th call. My pulse hammered at my temples. My thumb hovered above the reject button, but I didn't press it. I couldn't. My hand trembled there in midair. I imagined answering, his voice rising, mine shrinking, the same pattern swallowing me whole. My breath hitched. I wasn't ready. Not tonight. Not after everything I had just fought through. The phone stopped ringing. The room went still. Then, another buzz, another voicemail. I didn't listen. I took my glass of water to the couch and wrapped the blanket around my shoulders. Every muscle in my body felt tight with exhaustion. But underneath it all, beneath the hurt and the panic and the shock, there was something else. A quiet. A fragile quiet I didn't want to break. Not yet. Outside, snow dusted the apartment balcony like powdered sugar. The city lights reflected off the white rooftops. Somewhere in the hall, a neighbor closed their door softly. I exhaled long and slow, the kind of breath that carried days, maybe years of weight. My phone buzzed again. A text from Ava. Dad wants you at church tomorrow. Says he needs to explain everything so people stop talking. My jaw tightened. Church. Not for me, for his reputation. I typed back one word. No. Then added, I'm not going. Before I could put the phone down, Dad's name lit up my screen again, call number 29. I let it ring. I didn't move, didn't reach for it, didn't apologize to the empty room. I just sat there listening to the quiet I hadn't known I needed. The call faded to silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for choosing peace that wasn't his, but mine. I woke the next morning to a thin stripe of winter sunlight cutting across my ceiling, the kind that looked soft but carried a cold edge when it touched your skin. For a moment, I lay completely still, listening to the distant rumble of a snowplow somewhere down the street and the faint hum of the heater kicking on. My body felt heavy, my eyes gritty from a night of fragmented sleep. I wasn't sure what had woken me until I saw my phone blinking on the nightstand. A new voicemail. I stared at it for a long second before finally reaching for it. The screen was far too bright in the dim room, making me squint. There were 3 missed calls after the one I ignored last night. All from Dad. All between 2 and 4 a.m. My stomach tightened. I pressed the voicemail icon with a hesitant thumb and lifted the phone to my ear. Dad's voice came through gruff as always, but this time something in it wavered. He cleared his throat like he wasn't sure how to begin. Alyssa, I've been thinking. That alone made me sit up straighter. I talked to some folks this morning. People are asking questions. They're confused. I'm confused too. I don't understand everything you were saying in that speech. But another pause, a long one, the kind he only took when he was choosing between pride and honesty. But I'm willing to talk. If you want. My breath hitched. Not because it was perfect, far from it. But he wasn't barking orders. He wasn't accusing me. He wasn't demanding that we sit down like a family and fix this. He was just asking. A softer tone entered his voice near the end, quiet and almost defeated. Call me if you want to. The message ended. I sat there in the stillness of my room, phone clutched in my hand, and played the message again. This time I listened not for the words, but for the spaces between them. The hesitation, the uncertainty, the weary sigh. It was the closest thing to vulnerability I had heard from him in years. And yet I didn't feel the old pull. I didn't feel that immediate guilt that used to drag me to my feet at the first sign of his discomfort. I didn't feel the instinct to run and smooth everything over. What I felt instead was calm. A strange, steady calm I didn't quite recognize. I climbed out of bed, wrapped myself in a blanket, and stepped onto my small balcony. The air was sharp against my face, crisp enough to sting. Snowflakes drifted lazily from a pale gray sky, landing silently on the railing. I breathed it all in, the cold, the quiet, the clarity. Something inside me had shifted, and it wasn't shifting back. I replayed the voicemail one more time, this time sitting on the little metal bench outside. Dad sounded older than I remembered. Tired, maybe even scared. Not scared of losing me, scared of what people thought. Scared of losing his image. But somewhere in that message, beneath all that fear, was a hint of something real. He was afraid of losing connection. That mattered. But it wasn't enough to erase the years of dismissals, the silencing, the guilt, the burden he expected me to carry without complaint. I opened a new text message and typed slowly, carefully. "I heard your message. I appreciate it. I need some time. I'll reach out when I'm ready." I stared at the words for a long moment. They were simple, firm, honest. Not cruel, not cold, just true. Then I hit send. A slow breath left my lungs like I'd been holding it for years. Back inside the apartment felt warmer, brighter. I made tea, letting the steam rise around my face while my thoughts settled into something clearer than they had been in a long time. My desk sat untouched by the window, the notes for the Women in Tech Oregon event spread across it from the night before. I walked over and sat down. The blank page in my notebook felt less intimidating than usual. I picked up my pen and let it hover for a moment before it finally met the paper. Words came slowly at first, gentle, unsure, but then steadier. I wrote about the girl I used to be, the one who lined up toy chemistry sets on the kitchen table and dreamed big until the world told her to shrink. I wrote about being told I was too emotional, too dramatic, too much. I wrote about how shrinking became a habit, then a survival skill, then a prison. And then I wrote about the stage, the lights, the silence that turned into applause, the little girl in the front row who looked up at me with something like hope. Somewhere in the middle of a sentence, my phone buzzed. For a moment, my chest tightened, but it wasn't Dad. It was Ava. A picture message popped up, her standing outside with a coffee snow dotting her hair and scarf. She wore a small smile. Then a follow-up, "Proud of you today. And always." Warmth spread through me, soft and unexpected. I set the phone aside gently and kept writing. As the ink filled the pages, something settled inside me, a sense of alignment, of truth finally given air. I wasn't writing for Dad, or the people who would watch the new video, or even the audience at the upcoming event. I was writing for myself. For the girl who never got to speak. For the woman who finally did. Outside, children were making tracks in the snow, bundled in bright coats, their laughter echoing faintly up the side of the building. Life was moving, shifting, continuing in its quiet, relentless way. And for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to catch up. I wasn't trying to prove myself. I wasn't trying to belong somewhere that rejected me. I was simply becoming myself. The next morning arrived with a pale sun hanging low over the snow-covered rooftops, turning the world outside my window into a quiet watercolor of whites and soft blues. I sat at my desk with my tea cooling beside me, rereading the outline for the talk I'd been preparing for Women in Tech Oregon. The words on the page felt sturdier than the ones I'd written yesterday, like they belonged to a version of myself who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. My laptop chimed softly with a notification. I assumed it was a calendar reminder, but when I glanced at the corner of the screen, I froze. A new email. Sender Tech North. Subject Opportunity to Connect. My pulse quickened. Tech North wasn't just any company. It was the biggest tech organization in the Pacific Northwest. The place people whispered about in break rooms and dreamt about during tedious meetings. I clicked the message open with shaky fingers. Hi, Alyssa. We saw your talk last night and would love to speak with you after the holiday break. Your experience, perspective, and leadership align with the direction we're moving. We'd be thrilled to connect. Below the message was a direct recruiter contact, a calendar link, and a signature block from a senior hiring manager whose name I recognized instantly. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. This wasn't validation from my dad. This wasn't someone telling me I wasn't dramatic. This was the industry itself opening a door I didn't even dare to knock on before. Before I could fully process it, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unexpected name on the screen, Synertech, main office. My breath hitched. I hesitated only a second before answering. Hello? A calm, measured voice replied. Alyssa, this is Mark Talbot, the CEO. I sat up straighter. I watched your gala speech, he said. It was powerful, honest, and it brought attention to something we needed to address. I blinked, unsure where he was going. He continued. We want to make something clear. The workflow innovations Jason presented last quarter, they were yours, weren't they? My grip tightened on the phone. Yes, I said quietly. They were. There was a low exhale on the other end of the line. I suspected as much. And the comments circulating this morning confirmed it. Clients have been asking questions. We have a responsibility to tell the truth. My breath caught. We'd like you to lead the DEI initiative this coming year, he added, not as a symbolic gesture, as a real leader with lived experience. You've shaped this company more than you realize. It felt like someone had reached inside my chest and loosened something that had been tangled for years. Why me, I asked, not out of insecurity, but out of genuine disbelief. His answer was simple. Because you've earned it. For a moment, all I could do was close my eyes and let the weight of his words settle. This was the opposite of being dismissed. The opposite of being told I was too dramatic. The opposite of being pushed aside. This was recognition, real, tangible recognition. When we ended the call, I sat motionless for several seconds, letting the silence of my apartment wrap around me like a blanket. The heater hummed softly. The snow outside drifted lazily downward. I felt a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I opened my laptop again to close the email, but another notification appeared. A ping from a local Portland tech forum someone had posted the gala video. The title read, Local Product Lead Speaks Truth to Power at Holiday Gala. Below it were comments. Dozens, then hundreds. People sharing their own stories. People thanking me, people tagging friends. I scrolled until I found one that made me stop cold. Sharing this with my daughter. She needs to hear women say things like this. My eyes stung. Not with sadness, something else. Something like purpose. I pushed my chair back and walked to the window. Kids were building a snow fort across the street, their laughter muffled through the glass. A couple walked by with steaming cups of coffee scarves wrapped high around their faces. The ordinary world looked different today, not because it had changed, but because I had. My phone buzzed once more, this time a text from Mom. I watched your speech. I really watched it. I'm sorry I didn't ask more questions when you were younger. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. Her message was hesitant, but honest. My throat tightened. I'm proud of you, she added. Dad, he's not ready, but I hope he will be. I sat with those words for a long moment. They didn't fix everything. They didn't rewrite the years of silence. But they were a beginning, a small bridge forming between us. I typed back, Thank you, Mom. No extra explanations, no cushioning, just truth. Then I closed my eyes and let the warmth settle back into my chest. The kind of warmth that whispered, Your voice mattered. Your story mattered. You mattered. For the first time in my life, I believed it. I returned to my desk, opened the blank document for my upcoming talk, and placed my fingers on the keys. The words flowed steadily with a confidence I had never experienced before. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, for the first time, I wasn't falling with it. The week settled into a strange, quiet rhythm that felt both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. I went to work, joined meetings, replied to emails, and watched the ripple effects of the gala speech spread slowly through the industry. People who used to hurry past me in the hallway now stopped to chat. Others sent small, private messages of gratitude stories of their own experiences or simple encouragement. It was subtle, but the atmosphere around me shifted, less dismissive, more aware. By Thursday afternoon, the air outside had turned crisp again, flakes drifting down in slow patterns. I wrapped my coat tighter as I walked out of the office building, only to halt mid-step. Ava was leaning against my car. Her hands were shoved deep in her coat pockets, her breath mixing with the cold air in little white puffs. She looked nervous, like she had been rehearsing something. "You waiting for someone?" I asked lightly, unlocking the car. Her shoulders dropped with a guilty smile. "Yeah. You." I raised an eyebrow but didn't press her until we were both inside the warm car. She rubbed her palms together, staring straight ahead. For a few moments we just sat there in the quiet hum of the heater. Then she said, "I saw your speech, like 3 times. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent." She kept going. And I realized something. She breathed. Her voice wavered. "You've stood up for us, me Daniel, even Mom, for years. And I never once stood up for you." A lump formed in my throat, but she wasn't done. "I remember that night when Dad said I wasn't smart enough for robotics." Her voice cracked. "You're the only one who ever fought for me. You called him out even when it meant he'd freeze you out for days. I was 16. I didn't get it then. But I do now." She wiped at her cheek quickly, like she didn't want me to see. "I should have said something. I should have defended you back. Instead, I just let you take the hit." My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Hearing her say it out loud, something I'd buried for years, felt like someone had cracked open a door in a dark room. "Ava." I began gently, but she shook her head. "No, let me finish." She looked at me fully for the first time, eyes red but steady. "Dad gets so loud, and so sure. And I stayed quiet because it was easier. But when you spoke at that gala, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen." My breath hitched. The heater hummed softly, filling the silence between us. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. The words hit harder than I expected. For years, my voice had been treated as a problem, too loud, too emotional, too dramatic. Hearing my sister say she admired it felt like healing I didn't know I needed. I reached over and took her hand. She didn't pull away. We stayed like that for a moment, the weight of years settling and shifting into something lighter. When I finally spoke, my voice felt softer. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." She nodded, sniffling, then took a deep breath. "Dad's still—" "Dad," she murmured. "He's spinning out. But I want you to know I'm not on his side. Not this time." The knot in my chest loosened further. I hadn't realized how badly I needed even one family member to see me clearly. We sat there in the silence until her breathing steadied. She eventually glanced at the windshield where soft flakes tapped lightly against the glass. "You still mad at me?" she asked in a half-joking voice. I shook my head. "No, I'm just tired. But not at you." She exhaled slowly, relieved. "Good. Because I want to be better at this. At being your sister." Something warm flickered in my chest. "You already are," I said. She laughed, tears still shining. "Barely." We both smiled, something between us smoothing out in ways I hadn't expected. After a while, Ava reached for the door handle. "I'll let you go," she said. "But one more thing." I raised a brow. "Dad knows he messed up," she murmured. "He won't say it. Not yet. Maybe not ever the way you want, but I think you shook something in him." "I didn't mean to," I said quietly. I know she answered, but maybe it needed to happen. She climbed out before I could respond, closing the door gently behind her. I watched her walk away across the parking lot, her boots crunching softly in the slush. She turned once, waved lightly, then disappeared behind a row of parked cars. I leaned back in my seat, letting the heater warm my hands, letting the moment settle into me. Ava's apology wasn't an eraser, it didn't wipe away years of being dismissed. But it was a bridge, a real one, and maybe for the first time one that wouldn't crumble under the weight of truth. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside my car, something fragile and long buried finally began to thaw. I was halfway through a strategy document the next afternoon when my phone lit up again, this time with a name I hadn't seen on my screen in months. Mom. For a moment I just stared at it, uncertainty curling low in my stomach. She rarely called me directly unless something was wrong, or unless Dad told her to. But the memory of Ava's apology warmed something in me, softening the edges of old hurt, just enough for curiosity to push past hesitation. I answered. "Hi, Mom." There was a small rustle on the other end, like she'd stepped into a quiet room and closed the door behind her. Then her voice came through, gentle and wavering in a way that startled me. "Alyssa, I watched your speech." My breath caught. "Not the video, not that thing you did. She said your speech. I really watched it," she continued. "Twice, actually." I didn't speak. I wasn't sure I could. She inhaled shakily. I cried through most of it. A dull ache bloomed behind my ribs. I waited. "I wasn't crying because I was angry," she said softly. "I was crying because I finally understood how long you've been trying to tell us these things." My hand tightened around the edge of my desk. I hadn't expected this, not from her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have asked more questions when you came home excited about your projects. I should have pushed back when your dad was hard on you. I should have listened more." Her voice cracked on that last sentence, small and honest, in a way that reached straight into a place inside me I'd boarded up. "Mom," I said, but she kept going, almost afraid to lose her nerve. "You deserved encouragement. You deserved pride. And I didn't give you enough of either." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink into parts of me that had long forgotten what maternal comfort felt like. "And your dad?" She hesitated. "He's not ready to say these things. He's too caught up in how people are looking at him right now. I wish he weren't like that. I truly do." I swallowed hard. "He's hurting," she added. "But he's also stubborn. It may take time." Time. The one word that always felt both generous and cruel. "I just wanted you to know," she said quietly, "that I'm proud of you, Alyssa. I always have been, even when I didn't know how to show it." My eyes burned. I pressed a hand to my mouth and let myself feel it, really feel it. The validation I'd longed for as a child, the support I fought for as a teenager, the recognition I never received as an adult. "Thank you," I whispered. We talked for a few more minutes about small things, safe things. Nothing heavy, nothing accusatory. Just two women trying to rebuild something delicate between them. When the call ended, the silence in the apartment felt lighter than usual, almost warm. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Snow drifted close to the glass flakes, melting as they touched the pane. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying a secret weight or hiding bruised parts of myself. I felt seen, maybe imperfectly, maybe too late, but finally seen. Later that afternoon, after staring at my desk for longer than necessary, I reached for a number I'd saved months ago but never used. A therapist. Her voice was warm, steady, like a soft landing I didn't know I'd been seeking. We scheduled a session, then another. I didn't overthink it. I didn't doubt it. I just said yes. It felt strange and peaceful at the same time. Over the next few days, I fell into a new rhythm. Long walks in the cold. Quiet mornings with my notebook open, but no pressure to fill it. Evenings spent untangling thoughts I used to rush past. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was small, steady, often quiet. And it belonged entirely to me. Then, early one morning, sunlight cut across my desk in a bright diagonal line. My phone chimed with a new email notification. Half asleep, I reached for it. The subject line made me sit up straighter. Invitation to speak, Women in Tech, Oregon. The email was short but enthusiastic. Alyssa. We would be honored if you joined us as a guest speaker at our statewide conference next month. Your voice represents the clarity and strength we want to highlight. I reread it 3 times, letting each word settle like soft snow. A younger version of me, the girl at the kitchen table with her little science kit, would have cried. The teenage version of me, the one who fought back tears in the car after being told she wasn't thinking realistically, would have held this letter like a lifeline. The adult version of me, the one who stood on a stage and spoke her truth, felt something loosen inside her chest, something bright and warm. I stood and walked to the window, letting the light spill across my face. Outside, the world looked gentle again. Children in puffy coats dragging sleds across the sidewalk. Life was moving, changing, growing, and for the first time I wasn't waiting for permission to move with it. I sat back at my desk, opened a fresh page in my notebook, and began outlining what I wanted to share at the event. Not the polished version of my story, not the safe parts, the real story, the real voice, the real me. And as the pen moved across the paper, slow but certain, one quiet truth echoed in my mind. I wasn't just healing, I was becoming. Snow still rested on the branches outside my window the next morning when I opened my eyes. For a moment, I stayed under the covers, letting the warmth wrap around me as the heater clicked softly to life. Something about the quiet felt different, lighter, steadier, as if the world had finally stopped tilting beneath my feet. I sat up slowly, stretching the stiffness from my shoulders, until my gaze landed on the blinking light of my phone on the nightstand. Another voicemail. I didn't need to check the caller ID to know who it was. Still something inside me tensed, not with fear this time, but with a strange, settled calm. I reached for the phone and tapped the message. Dad's voice came through immediately, but it wasn't sharp or defensive like before. It was slow, hesitant. Alyssa, I've been thinking. He cleared his throat, and I could almost picture him standing at the kitchen counter, fiddling with the rim of a mug, unsure what to say. I talked to a few people, he continued, and I still don't understand everything you said, but I want to. My breath caught, not because it was perfect, but because it was new. I can't promise I'll get it right, he said, but I'll try, if you want to talk. The message ended abruptly, as if he'd run out of courage. I sat there holding the phone, listening to the silence filling the room. A younger version of me would have burst into tears at hearing my father attempt softness. Another version of me, the teenager who once waited for him to say anything, kind, would have run straight back into the kitchen, expecting this moment to fix everything. But I wasn't either of those girls anymore. I slipped out of bed and walked to the small balcony. Cold air rushed up to greet me as I stepped outside, the kind that steals your breath before you can shape it. Snowflakes drifted lazily from a pale sky, settling on the railing like tiny temporary stars. I replayed the message again, then set the phone on the bench beside me. The cold air made my lungs expand deeper than they had in days. My father's voice didn't crush me anymore. It didn't define me. It didn't shrink me. It simply existed. And I existed too, in my own voice, my own choices separate from his. After a long moment, I opened a new text and typed slowly, I heard your message. Thank you. I'm not ready to talk yet. I need time. I read it twice, making sure it still reflected the truth inside me. It did. Then I pressed send. The breath that left me afterward felt like release. Not rebellion, not defiance. Just truth. Inside, the apartment welcomed me with warmth. My desk was still covered in notes for my upcoming talk, small scribbles, highlighted lines, phrases circled and reworked. But instead of pressure, the sight filled me with a quiet sort of excitement. I sat down with my notebook and let my pen move across the paper. The story I planned to tell at the conference was no longer just a timeline of events. It was a bridge for the girl I used to be, for the woman I was becoming, and for the people who needed to hear their own truth reflected back at them. Halfway through revising a paragraph, my phone buzzed again. A text from Ava. "Dad told us he left you a message. He didn't say what he said, but he looked nervous, and older somehow." I smiled faintly. Then came another line. "I'm really glad he's trying. But I'm even more glad you're not rushing." I typed back, "Thank you," and set the phone aside. Later that afternoon, while polishing a few slides for the event, another notification popped up on my laptop, a meeting invitation from TechNorth's recruiter. I clicked accept with a sense of steadiness that surprised me. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't validation seeking. This was alignment, my work finally meeting the door that had waited for me all along. Around sunset, the sky turned a pale shade of pink and gold, the fading light wrapping the room in a soft glow. I walked to the window and watched the snow-covered streets below. Kids were rolling snowballs into a lopsided snowman. A couple walked past laughing quietly. A dog bounded through a drift of snow like it was the happiest creature alive. Life moved on. And for the first time, I felt like I was moving with it, not chasing it, not battling it. Just moving. When I returned to my desk, my phone buzzed once more. This time it wasn't Dad or Ava or Mom. It was Daniel. A simple message. "Hey, I watched your video. I didn't know. But I'm trying to understand. If you want to talk sometime, I'm here." I stared at the message for a long moment. Another small bridge. Not perfect. Not enough to carry weight yet. But something. I typed back, "Thanks. Let's talk soon." When I finally shut down my laptop for the night, I felt something warm settle into my chest, a sense of possibility that didn't come from my family's reaction or the industry's praise. It came from me. I turned off the lights, took one last look at the snow-flecked city outside my window, and whispered to myself the truth. I had only recently learned to believe I wasn't ruined by walking away from old patterns. I was remade by stepping into my own voice. The auditorium buzzed softly as people filed into their seats, the low hum of conversation echoing off the high vaulted ceiling. Rows of lights illuminated the stage in a warm glow, and the event banner, "Women in Tech Oregon," hung behind the podium like a quiet promise. I stood backstage, fingers wrapped around the note cards I no longer needed. My heart beat steadily, not with panic this time, but with a deep, steady focus that felt almost foreign in its calmness. Nora peeked through the curtain, then turned back to me with a grin. "It's a full house," she whispered. "They're excited for you." A younger version of me would have shrunk at those words. But the woman standing here now lifted her chin and let the weight of the moment settle into her shoulders like a mantle she had finally earned. The stage manager gave me a nod. Then came the introduction. And tonight's keynote speaker, Alyssa Hart. Applause filled the room, rolling like a warm tide across the auditorium. The lights dimmed slightly as I stepped onto the stage. It wasn't the same nervous, breathless walk I took at the gala. This time, each step felt intentional, grounded, like I was walking into a space that belonged to me. I reached the podium, took a slow breath, and let the room come into focus. "Hi, everyone." I began, my voice carrying more strength than I expected. "Thank you for being here. And thank you for giving me the space to speak, not as someone perfect, not as someone fearless, but as someone learning to be herself." The crowd leaned in silent and attentive. I wasn't always comfortable taking up space. I continued. For most of my life, I was told I was too dramatic, too emotional, too intense. I heard those words so often that I learned to shrink myself before anyone else had the chance. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the faces watching me. But shrinking didn't make me easier to love. It didn't make me more acceptable. It only made me disappear from my own life. I spoke about the gala, about the panic that turned into clarity, about the little girl in the front row who unknowingly anchored me back into myself. I talked about the flood of reactions afterward, the unexpected opportunities and the quiet messages from people who had felt the same weight of being too much. And then I spoke about my family. I wish I could tell you that standing up for myself magically fixed everything I said softly. It didn't. Healing rarely looks like that. A ripple of understanding moved through the room. But something changed when I finally chose myself not out of anger and not out of revenge, but out of truth. When I stopped apologizing for who I was, the world stopped asking me to. I told them about Dad's voicemail, about my decision to ask for time, about Mom's apology, and Ava's honesty that softened years of quiet guilt. I didn't paint it as perfect reconciliation. I didn't pretend it was all resolved. I'm still learning what my boundaries look like, I said. I'm still learning how to speak without waiting for permission. But I'm finally living my life instead of performing the one someone else wrote for me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of recognition, understanding, gentleness. I took a breath, letting myself feel the moment. So if you've ever been told you're too much, I said, echoing the line that changed everything. Maybe you were just too bright for people sitting too close. The applause began slowly, then grew, then spilled over like warmth breaking open. People rose to their feet. Some wiped tears. Others nodded with fierce personal relief. I stepped back from the podium, hands trembling. But this time it wasn't fear. It was becoming. After the event, people gathered around me. Students, developers, designers, mothers with daughters in tow. They shared stories, asked questions, thanked me for speaking aloud the things they had been afraid to name. Their words wove into me, thread by thread, a tapestry of connection I hadn't known I'd been missing. When the room finally emptied and the lights dimmed, I stood alone on the stage once more, looking out at the rows of seats where moments earlier hundreds of people had listened, breathed, and felt with me. This time I didn't feel small. This time I didn't feel dramatic. This time I felt right where I belonged. As I gathered my things and walked off stage, my phone buzzed. A text from Ava appeared. "Proud of you today. Really proud." I smiled, slid the phone back into my bag, and stepped out into the cool night air. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and slow, blanketing the city in a gentle hush. I tilted my head back and breathed it in. My life wasn't perfect. My family wasn't perfect. My healing wasn't complete. But I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was expanding into my work, into my voice, into my new beginning. And if the world wasn't ready, it would learn. If you've been following this story and it resonated with you even a little, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment. Tell me what part struck you, or share your own experience. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive, and I'm grateful you're here for the journey.